All right, guys, it's that time.
I don't know what she's wearing.
Good morning, everybody. Good-looking crew out there today. The people online don't actually know how many people are here, so I'd say we're about 500, 550 today, right? I mean, we're down a little from normal, but all right, we're going to start with reading our summary that we came up with last time, Genesis 45:25 to 46:30. So, and that's what I have up there. So our title, James gave it to us this week, was Jacob finds out Joseph is alive, and he and his family pack up and go settle in Goshen, and there they are reunited. Our summary was, the brothers came home, and he didn't believe them about Joseph. Jacob's vision at Beersheba, God says, you're not coming home. Jacob leaves for Egypt. Then 70 or 75 people from Jacob come to Egypt. Jacob and Joseph are reunited. Joseph weeps. Jacob says, I can die now. I have seen Joseph. Put it in the Bible. All right, now our summary for last week. So we had two titles, so I decided to go with the Bullwinkle cartoon theme because they were both good for their own reasons. So we had Julie and Mike this time. So Jacob's family settles in Goshen with Pharaoh's permission as shepherds while famine continues, with Joseph exchanging food for everyone's livestock and buying all their land for Pharaoh, except for the land of the priests. Or Pharaoh gets extremely rich and Joseph sets his family up for success. So I don't know if you remember the old Bullwinkle cartoons. They always opened with two titles.
Yeah.
So I looked that up on Wikipedia, and they actually, they have them all there. So. Or, I mean, I memorized them all, so that's why. No. All right, so what's the first thing that happens? Genesis 45:25 up through 46:30. We talked about last time.
Family goes to Egypt.
Okay. Jacob's family goes to Egypt. Okay. Then what? Yeah.
Jacob and Joseph are finally reunited.
Yep. Kind of had that last time, but we'll put them both.
Yeah.
Reunited.
In between there, Jacob, or God tells Jacob that Joseph will close his eyes so he'll see Joseph before he dies.
Okay. Oh wait, you know what? I told you guys the wrong verses.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm like, that's why we have that. It was 40. I got the name of the document changed, and then I may cheat and copy the last week's document.
49.
It's 46:31 to 47:26. That explains why. I'm like, I know we did this. All right, we'll start over. Pretend that didn't happen. We'll cut that in editing later. Start again. 46:31.
Was it in this one that he made his family like the keepers of the land?
Yep.
Livestock, yeah.
Israelites. In charge of all of Pharaoh's livestock.
And then he made the people pay with their livestock for grain,
Yep.
putting them in charge of everything basically.
Okay. Very good. What else?
Then they use their land to pay for their food. So Joseph owned all the land.
Egyptians sold, let's say, themselves and their land.
Yeah, because they were slaves. Yeah.
To Pharaoh. Okay. What else? I don't want to miss Jacob's very hilarious meeting with Pharaoh. The meeting of the two nations.
Jacob's 130 years old.
That's right, Jacob is 130 years old. Pharaoh asks them, wow, they're having fun up there, today.
Their review is more fun than our review.
I think you're right. I don't know if it's more effective. I was teaching a class one time, it was just obvious they were all bored, and I just made them all stand up and run through the fountain at Purdue. So they all came back wet, and we were all paying attention at that point in time. So. All right. Anything else? It's a short one. We had a lot to talk about, though. All right. I was going in the can. Okay, so pick back up at Genesis 47:27 is where we're going to pick back up. 47:27. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen. They gained possessions in it and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. Remember that, 17 years, 147, because he came in at 30, right? And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place." And he answered, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. And then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. So they're there 17 years. There were 5 more years of famine, so there's 12 years after the famine that they're still in Egypt. And I had an interesting question. Why didn't they go home after the famine? The text doesn't tell us. The famine was over. Everything was fine. They could have gone home. Had they gone home, they wouldn't have ended up slaves. I have no answer for this. The only answer I have is God's plan.
I'm going to say this is the new land that God gave him. And I think, isn't that what Joseph explained to him? Without all this happening, you guys wouldn't have been able to...
Joseph will explain after Jacob's death that God will come and send them back to Canaan. But they hadn't been there that long, you know. I think life was good in Egypt is what it amounted to. And so none of them had the wanderlust to head back to Canaan. And I think from God's meeting with Jacob earlier, I think he was just sort of implied, you guys are going to be there a while. That's of course what he had told Abraham originally. Why would the location of Jacob's bones matter to him? He'll be dead.
That's a big thing in the Old Testament.
It absolutely is.
You don't hear anything about it in the New Testament, but like, because like Moses' body, like, we find out there was a fight over that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yes, it's I don't either, and it's an interesting question because he's putting a tremendous burden on Joseph to do this, right? When we get to the point where they walk out, where they take everything there, it's this huge caravan. I mean, he's making him swear. He's like, if you do nothing else for me, take my bones back and bury them with my fathers. I have the feeling the older you get, the more that makes sense. Where you're buried matters, I think, more than when you're 16. And he's, of course, 147, so he can definitely have an opinion.
I think part of it is trusting that God was going to, at some point, bring them out of Egypt, and he would be back with all the rest of the Israelites once they left.
That's a good point. It's a sign of faith. I mean, and Joseph does something similar. He says, when you guys leave, take my bones up out of here and go back to Canaan. I think the primary answer is that back in the days of the territorial gods, like we said before, the gods didn't travel between each other's territories. The dirt mattered. There's a story later where Naaman, the general of the foreign army, comes to, was it Elijah or Elisha? And after he heals him, he doesn't believe he's going to heal him. He heals him of leprosy, and after he heals him of leprosy, he was a total jerk beforehand. And he goes and does what the prophet says, doesn't think it's going to work. It does work, totally healed. And what he does is he says, I am going to take a wagon load of dirt from here, from Israel, back with me to my land, and I will not pray to a god other than your God. And I will only do it on the ground that I took from Israel. That dirt mattered. Like the physical territory was a big deal to them. And I think that's why. That's part of their culture. That's part of how God had set up the world at that time. And that's why we don't care about it now. After Christ came, the territories are gone. We don't care about that stuff anymore, right? We know that we're all universally God's. And his inheritance in Israel was important at the time, but now the whole world is his inheritance, right? He's taking it all back, and Jesus is going to rule the whole thing. So that's why it's less important for us. But there's a really fun, I know, we've done enough math already, a really cool math thing here. That when you see it, I think you're going to see that God was here. It's God's little way of saying, I'm here in this story. So how old was Jacob when he died?
147.
That's right. And if we go back and look up how old Isaac was, he was 180. If we go back and look up how old Abraham was, he was 176. I think those numbers seem to have nothing to do with each other. I did not come up with this, by the way. I don't know what kind of genius does. This is 5 squared plus 7. This is 6 squared plus 5. And this is 7 squared plus 3. Their ages actually have a pattern. And if you add up the numbers in each row, it's 17. You can do it. Add it up. 17. The exact number of years that Jacob was in Egypt. In fact, in the text right before it tells us that he was 147, it tells us 17 years. So in the text, we get a 17, and then we get the end of this 3 sequence of 17s. Oh, that was cool. That only happens with God's finger in history, I think. All right, so back to 48, verse 1. After this, Joseph was told, behold, your father is ill. So he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, your son Joseph has come to you. Then Israel summoned his strength, and he sat up in bed. He's 147. This is a big deal for him to sit up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. And as for me, when I came from Paddan to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. This is a heartbreaking picture, right? We learn a little bit later his eyes are dim. You know, he has a hard time seeing. He can barely sit up on the bed. He's a very old man. He's called his son to him to tell him something. His mind wanders. The little foray over to Rachel doesn't fit in the story. I mean, I think at this point his mind is wandering back to the events of his life, and he's having trouble keeping everything straight. But he not only has given Ephraim and Manasseh a real blessing. I mean, this means these kids get territory, right? And in Israel, it's a big deal to be a son of Jacob. It's a blessing to Joseph too, because what greater blessing is there for a parent than to know that your kids are going to be taken care of, right? That they have an inheritance here. And so then he calls the grandsons in. So verse 8. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, who are these? And Joseph said to his father, they are my sons whom God has given me here. And he said, bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. And now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face. And behold, God has let me see your offspring also. And then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father, since this one's the firstborn. Put your hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh." And thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. You remember the scene when Jacob went in to see his father Isaac, and his eyes were dim? What did Isaac say? "Who are you? Who is this?" It's almost this exact same scene acted out here. The boys are there that he just said are going to be my own boys. And he said, "Who are you? Who are these?"
How does he know that this young? I mean, is God talking to him as he's doing it? Like, how does he know that the younger one is going to be the multitude of nations?
Oh, so we'll get to that in a second. But in Isaac's blessing of Jacob and Esau, it felt maybe prophetic, but you also could have totally just read it like a standard blessing of a father to a son. And then once he had given that to Jacob, he couldn't take it away and give it back to Esau because of the deception. So it could have been prophetic. It turned out to kind of be to fit history. Jacob's, you don't have that luxury. When Jacob gets to what he's going to say about the boys here, what he said here, what he says about his other 10 sons, there's no question, or the other 11 sons, there's no question it's prophecy. It's absolutely prophecy. So yes, God has shown, because he even says in a little bit, he brings the boys in and he says, "Let me tell you what's to come." Like he says, "I'm prophesying." So he's absolutely prophesying here. But of course, now you really think that the promise is going to flow through Ephraim at the moment, right? I mean, we reenacted the scene where the promise flowed through Jacob. So now we've reenacted it that it should flow through Ephraim. The younger became better than the older. Jacob's the one blessing him directly. He says, "You're going to become a great nation," but it's not. It's through Judah. Now he does say in there, you remember when we talked about the angel of Yahweh? This is another angel of Yahweh passage. He starts out verse 15. He says, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who's been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys." He treats God and the angel as the same thing, as if God is sort of two things, an angel and God. But this blessing at the end, "God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh," we probably don't fully recognize the importance of that. If you knew any Jewish people and you were there at their home on Friday nights on their Sabbath, you would know this very, very well, because to this day, every Friday evening, Jewish fathers place their hands on the heads of their sons and they quote this verse. They say, "May you become as Ephraim and Manasseh." And for their daughters, they place their hands on their heads and they say, "May God make you like Sarah, Rachel, Leah, and Rebekah." And it's an odd thing, because why the matriarchs for the girls, but not the patriarchs for the boys? Why doesn't he say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Why do they say, "May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh"? And there was a Orthodox rabbi, Joseph Hertz, who wrote the Orthodox commentary on the Torah, the current one. And he had a absolutely fascinating point about Ephraim and Manasseh. He said, "To this day, every pious Jewish father on Sabbath Eve places his hand on his son and blesses him in the words, 'God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh.' Ephraim and Manasseh would not barter away their Jewishness for the most exalted social position or the most enviable political career in the Egyptian state. they voluntarily gave up their place in the higher Egyptian aristocracy and openly identified themselves with their alien kinsmen, the despised shepherd immigrants. Every Jewish parent may well pray that their child would show dedication to their father and their father's God, as Ephraim and Manasseh did. I had never noticed that in this story. Ephraim and Manasseh were the sons of Joseph. They could have been in Pharaoh's court the rest of their life and become Egyptians. They were half Egyptian. Their mom was the daughter of the pagan priest, right? And they chose Israel. They chose Joseph's God. And that is a big deal, because they gave up a lot. But this is a sort of strange ceremony taking place here. Yeah.
Sorry, one of the comments I had read also said this was the first example of sibling harmony, and how one of the ways, I don't know, according to history, what I read, don't really know, but they were saying that it was that blessing, also the idea of finally let's go the route of the together instead of all the division and.
That's a good point. All the brothers up to here, we talked about that before, were terrible. Ephraim and Manasseh are together. I like that. That's a good point. So why did Jacob do this strange ceremony? Why adopt the grandkids to be his own? Why not just give Joseph the inheritance? And the clearest answer I can see is in order to double Joseph's inheritance. It was his favorite son. If he can get two sons to represent Joseph, they get twice as much. And so that's why I think his mind wanders back to Rachel at the end of his little speech, because it doesn't fit the story unless he's thinking Rachel would have had more kids had she been alive. And so I am going to increase the sort of Rachel side of my progeny by doubling Joseph into his first two sons. So that made sense to me. So this clearly looks like prophecy. That's just what you asked. How does that turn out in history? Does Ephraim end up better than Manasseh? So first off, you have Numbers. So in Numbers, after they come out, there's two censuses in Numbers where they count everybody up. Ephraim is out to an early lead. In Numbers, the census in Numbers 1, Ephraim has 40,500 people. Manasseh has 32,200. But by the end of Numbers, in Numbers 26, Ephraim has fallen behind, and he's at 32,500, and he's actually shrunk, and Manasseh's gotten a lot bigger at 52,700. So now Manasseh has more people. So I don't know, maybe that's some sibling rivalry. They were in a race together. But Joshua is an Ephraimite. So the leader of everybody after Moses came from the tribe of Ephraim. And Manasseh gets two huge territories. So here's the territories. If you just look at the size of the territories, you may not think so. But this is Manasseh. He's got territory on this side of the Jordan and that side of the Jordan. This is Ephraim right here. You got Simeon, Judah, Benjamin, Dan, Reuben, Gad, Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, Asher. That's what these are, okay? And so Manasseh gets two sides, huge, lots more people at the end of Numbers. Ephraim gets this little part right here. Manasseh's territory, though, was a lot harder to clear of forests and Canaanites, so it may be bigger, but it's not necessarily all usable. But then the turning point comes when the civil war starts. When Solomon dies and his son Rehoboam screws it all up for everybody, Jeroboam is an Ephraimite. He's from the tribe of Ephraim. And so Jeroboam becomes the king over all 10 tribes. He sets up everything that happens from there until the Assyrians wipe out the Israelites in 722 BC. So now the capital of, so what Jeroboam did was he set up two golden calves, one down here and one way up there in the top at the two ends of the nation, and they ended up worshiping the golden calves instead of God. And we'll get to that why when we get to that point. But Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom, is actually in Manasseh's territory. So then you think, well, Manasseh may be more important. But what really seals the deal is because Jeroboam was in charge, Ephraim becomes the mightiest tribe in all of Israel, to the point that in the civil war, all of Israel is called Ephraim. in most of the later texts, it just uses Ephraim to refer to the entire northern kingdom. So Jacob ends up being correct. That he ends up being right, that Ephraim ends up as the greater. Even though he's right, he says, don't worry, Joseph, Manasseh will become a great nation, right? He's going to have great stuff. But in the end, Ephraim is going to essentially become synonymous with Israel because they're so powerful. And of course, Ephraim, all of the north, tries to destroy Judah and Benjamin, and they don't succeed. And so that's the source of the civil war here. So, verse 21. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you, and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and my bow. When did Jacob fight the Amorites? Anybody remember that in our storyline so far? We know where it is, where he's talking about, this hillside. It's here. And the reason we know where it is because Joseph's tomb exists to this day. It's actually at Shechem. So that little hill right there, that tell, that's what we think of as Shechem. Joseph's tomb's right here. Jacob bought ground from the Shechemites, right? So he didn't take that with his sword and bow. So this has to be referring to one of three things. Either there's a battle that took place where he expanded that land that he bought, and it just doesn't tell us about it. Or he is taking credit for Simeon and Levi destroying the entire town of Shechem, which he chastises them for really badly at the end. So that does not seem likely to me that he would call that his own sword and bow and be happy that he took that. Well, no, actually it was only those two. There's no other fighting recorded here, but this is a serious difference between all other histories and this one. All other histories, every battle that we won anything is highlighted, right? How amazing was this king? He did this, and he took them, and he slaughtered everybody, and he completely won. You know, he skunked them. It was 48-0. Like, that's what every other history of people in the ancient world talks about. Apparently there's a battle here that Jacob has that we don't even know about. We don't even revel in it, right? Because the point of Genesis was goodness and the path to salvation. It was not military conquest. But who are the Amorites? Every time we hit a people's name, we should try to remember where did they come from. So they, back in Genesis, I didn't write down which verse. I think it's Genesis 13. Canaan comes from Ham. Okay, Ham, son of Noah. His son Canaan gets cursed when Ham had uncovered his father's nakedness. And Canaan's descendants, it says there, were the Amorites. And so that's who the Amorites are. That's where they came from. They also appear around the same time in some Sumerian texts that are outside the Bible, and they're called sort of the Westerners. There's a word in there they use that's just like Amorite that means Westerners. And so they appear about that 2500, 2600 BC timeline, way over on that end of our timeline. Abraham's friend Mamre, you know the guy from the Oaks of Mamre? He was an Amorite. God, at about the same time, tells Abraham that he is not going to get the promised land permanently yet because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. In other words, they haven't yet made all of the evil they're going to make. There's still some good there worth keeping. That's who the Amorites are. And that's where you start to see that by about 1800 BC, when Jacob's speaking, Amorites just means everybody in Canaan. I mean, Canaan was the grandfather, essentially, but Amorites, like Ephraim, eventually becomes the word for all of Israel. Amorite becomes the word for all of Canaan. So as we see Amorites to the rest of the text, think Canaanites. It's just everybody in that region. And really from Exodus forward, that we're going to get to very soon, you're just going to see Amorites all over the place. So that's what it is. But Joseph's tomb, I thought that was cool. I did not know Joseph's tomb was still around today. That's what this is. It's a picture from the 1800s of Joseph's tomb. It actually exists there. That's what it was. This is what it looks like more today. It's been cleaned up a lot. There are a sect of Jews that have lived there since effectively the time of Joseph that have taken care of this place. But back in the mid-'80s, a bunch of Palestinians came in and destroyed it. So they rebuilt it, but there was a massive, massive problem at that time. So that's Joseph's tomb. I'll leave it there. I'm going to leave it there because I found a really cool thing on Chabad.org, one of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish sects, that apparently Mark Twain visited Joseph's tomb. And if you want to find a well-written account of anything, go find Mark Twain. Like, read his account of Joan of Arc. It's amazing. It's an entire book. It's fascinating. But anyway, so he actually wrote about it in his diary when he visited Joseph's tomb, and they published his diary later on after his death, and I just thought it was fascinating. He said, at 2 o'clock we stopped for lunch and rest at the ancient Shechem, between the historic mounts of Gerizim and Ebal, where in the old times the books of the law, the curses and the blessings were read from the heights to the Jewish multitudes below. About 1.5 miles from Shechem, we halted at the base of Mount Ebal before a little square area enclosed by a high stone wall, nearly whitewashed. Across one end of this enclosure is a tomb. It is the tomb of Joseph. No truth is better authenticated than this. Few tombs on earth command the veneration of so many races and men of diverse creeds as this of Joseph. Samaritan and Jew, Muslim and Christian alike revere it and honor it with their visits. The tomb of Joseph, the dutiful son, the affectionate, forgiving brother, the virtuous man, the wise prince and ruler. Egypt felt his influence, and the world knows his history. And regarding the city's Jewish community, he writes, for thousands of years, this clan have dwelt in Shechem under strict taboo and having little commerce or fellowship with their fellow men of any religion or nationality. For generations, they have not numbered more than 100 or 200, but they still adhere to their ancient faith and maintain their ancient rites and ceremonies. Talk of family and old descent. This handful of old first families of Shechem can name their fathers straight back without a flaw for thousands of years. I found myself gazing at any straggling scion of this strange race with a riveted fascination, just as one would stare at a living mastodon or a megatherium. Like, I did not know that. It's there. Like what we're reading here from about as far back as recorded history goes, it's still there. I find that fascinating. All right, so 49, verse 1. Then Jacob called his sons together and said, gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Now you see this is all offset here, right? We've talked about this before. That means this is poetry. It's a combination of truth and poetry. And do you guys remember what poetry, the purpose of poetry is? It's important when we read this to know what that is, because I did not get poetry for the bulk of my adult life. It made no sense to me. I liked rhyming words. That was nice. This does not rhyme. You feel like it should rhyme if it's going to be poetry. And so there was a fantastic book called Poetic Diction by a guy named Owen Barfield, who was a buddy of C.S. Lewis. And diction means meaning. It means poetic meaning. Like, where's the meaning of poetry come from? And he's the one that finally explained it to me. The purpose of prose, so we have prose and poetry. Those are the two forms of writing. The purpose of prose is to communicate an idea from my head. Let's say I have the idea of a square into your head. And the prose isn't perfect. You're not going to get the perfect picture of what I have in my head in your head. That's the purpose of prose. The purpose of poetry is to communicate an experience to your soul, from the author's soul to your soul. And so when you read this, it's this picturesque language that is trying to engender some feeling in you, right? It's supposed to give you the experience that Jacob was thinking of at that time. And so that's why it can seem weird. And also why it's really hard for us today to read it. Because a lot of poetry depends on shared experience. And, you know, they didn't look at a donkey the same back then as we look at a donkey today. So if he refers to a donkey, you're not going to be able to get the same feeling that he's going for. So try to put your mind in the mindset of these guys, and it'll help you understand what's going on here. So, first, assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the first fruits of my strength. preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. And Reuben's like, all right, this is going good. Thanks, Dad. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed and then you defiled it. He went up to my couch when he slept with Bilhah to defile her, so she could not become matriarch over Rachel. Jacob did not forgive him for that. I would call that Jacob's revenge. He's like, just wait, it's coming. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. There are a lot of secular people who claim this was all written later because so many of these prophecies come true. And so like, well, they just wrote it after the fact and wrote it back in. Like Ephraim wrote this later on to say how they were going to be so amazing, right? But if that was the case, the Levites were the leaders of the aristocracy in Israel, right? They were the priestly class. They were the ones who would have done the writing. Why did they write themselves as having nothing but curses? Right? Their ancestor got nothing but a curse. That makes no sense. But Dennis Prager pointed out of Simeon and Levi that there's one key difference between good men and bad men, and that is how they act when they're angry. Too many people today give violence a pass because the perpetrator had a grievance, as if that explains it. They're angry, so their overreaction is forgiven. But Jacob actually does the opposite here. He actually uses the fact that they're angry. He doubles down on it and he says, because you acted that way when you were angry, it's doubly bad for you. You've got to keep a hold of yourself when you're angry for these things. And the predictions did come true. We talked about this back when they murdered the Shechemites, that the Levites have no land. They get spread throughout all of Israel. There's no polygon here for Levi. So they get spread throughout all of Israel. And Simeon, they're down here. They get a little territory out of the middle of Judah, and they essentially just absorb themselves into Judah. Some of them migrate up to the north during the Civil War. Some of them come back. They just disappear. They literally just get spread out. So Jacob's prophecy completely comes true here about Simeon and Levi. Verse 8, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub from the prey, my son. You have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Bind his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine, and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Like, we don't fully appreciate what it means to be a crouched lion, as they would have, where they probably encountered a lion out in the wild. You go to the zoo and take the bars away, and then think about Judah being a crouched lion.
Yeah.
This is the best blessing everybody gets except for Joseph. Okay? So now there is clear clue that it may not be Ephraim that this blessing flows through, right? The scepter shall not pass from Judah. And so the Christians say that means that Judah's going to be in charge, which they were, until Jesus comes. The Jews don't agree, but that's what we say. And I think it's right. The Jews still believe that the right to rule, though, stays with Judah. It's still with Judah, because they just don't believe that the Messiah happened. So when it went through David and then went on, they're actually back in the, I didn't write this down, but the John Hyrcanus and the Hasmonean dynasty, remember in the intertestamental period? They were of the tribe of Levi. And when they attempted to take power and took power, the Jews said it was all illegitimate because you were not of the tribe of Judah. And it says that you have to be of the tribe of Judah to have the scepter and the right to rule. And so that was a big deal. That's why the first Hasmonean kings didn't claim to be king. They ruled, but they didn't claim to be king. They agreed that they did not have that power. And then at one point, two of the brothers were fighting, and the one brother says, I'm God's anointed king. And so they don't last much longer after that. All right, so 13. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. So, if you notice, we were going in order through the sons. All of a sudden, we jumped to Zebulun. He's son number 10. And from this point forward, the order, I could make no sense of the order. It seems to be the order they've lined up around Jacob's bed. And I think he's just going around them, and Zebulun's just after Judah. That's all I can tell. This one's a little hard, though. He says he's a haven for ships. Most of the maps I found had something like this, and Zebulun doesn't touch water. There's the Sea of Galilee, there's the Mediterranean, and Zebulun is in here in the middle. So we don't really know, though, exactly where these territories were. We're using archaeology, we're guessing. So some of them that take this part of the text and say, well, he must have been by water, then they're going to draw Zebulun extending from the Mediterranean all the way over to Galilee sometimes. I found very few maps like that, though. And this is a poem. So a haven of ships could just be the main metaphor that he's trying to give. I don't know. But that's Zebulun. Issachar is a strong donkey crouching between the sheepfolds. I've said that to my sons often. They're very happy when he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant at forced labor. And Issachar's like, well, I'm glad was that a blessing or a curse? Wait, do I have to be the slave or what? What's going on here? Nobody really knows what this one means as far as I can tell. I mean, maybe somebody does, but I just don't know about them. He is the end of Leah's children in that list, but he was older than Zebulun, and so he should have been before Zebulun if we just jumped to Leah's children. But I don't know what that means. He supposedly was a hard worker, I guess. Dan shall judge his people. The word Dan, if you remember from when he was named from Leah, that she said God had judged between me and Rachel and had given me a son. So she named him essentially the word judge. So this here is sort of like saying judge shall judge his people. So Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider falls backward. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. That is also a weird one. We just don't get nice, easy to understand verses. I think viper and serpent refers to Dan being the first one to worship other gods. That comes in Judges 18. They can't fully overthrow the Canaanites down here in their area. This was Dan down here, this little green one. They have trouble overthrowing them, and so they move up north, and Dan ends up being way up high, up at the very northernmost end, so that we call all of Israel sometimes from Dan to Beersheba, like the whole thing. And along the way, they meet a guy, steal his gods, murder an entire innocent town, and force the grandson of Moses, his name was Jonathan, Gershon was Moses' son, Gershon's son Jonathan, he becomes their priest to the other gods that they stole from the guy whose town they massacred. It may very well be that when Jacob completely jumps out of the narrative and says, I wait for your salvation, O Lord, he was seeing a vision of what was coming from Dan, because he's calling them a viper and a serpent, and they don't come out well in the rest of the story.
Well, I mean, being called a snake is not typically a compliment.
That's right, it's not a compliment. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. So Gad, he was the firstborn of Zilpah, Leah's maid. His tribe is over on the eastern border. They decide to stay over here on this side of the Jordan, and that actually causes a little bit of a fight within Israel as they're headed into the land, because the other Israelites are like, you just want to stay here so you don't have to go fight. So they commit to go fight. It doesn't turn out well for them. Do you remember the man who had legions of demons within him when Jesus found him? He was the man from the Gadites, the country of the Gadites. So he lived over here. By the time of Jesus, the Gadites became completely secular to the point that they were raising pigs. They were pig farmers, and they had tons of demons inside of people in that area, and so that's what happens to Gad eventually. But they do, before that, like up to and through the David era, they are really bold border warriors, because they're the first line of defense from anybody coming this way into Israel that way. So they become known for being that. The final sort of overcoming he's talking about seems to be when they destroyed a group called the Hagrites under King Saul in 1 Chronicles 5. So that happens. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. That's the blessing you want. This land he gets ends up being some of the most fertile land in all of Israel, and they actually supply a lot of the food to Hiram, king of Tyre, later on. And so they generally get a good side of the deal here. Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears beautiful fawns. And Naphtali had to be saying, what? Like, female deer with pretty babies. Thanks, Dad. Like, I don't know what that one means either. Not exactly masculine, though. But now we're on to Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him. They shot at him and harassed him severely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty, beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. In that blessing, Jacob praises God as the source of all the blessings he's ever had. And we move on to Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. Completely unclear whether that's good or bad. Benjamin has some good times and some rough times coming up. I think this is one of those, just store this up and ask God someday. In heaven you can ask him, how did those all turn out? Like, help explain that to me, because we don't fully know. But there is one key thing missing in these blessings, and I alluded to it, I think last week or the week before. There is no mention of the brothers selling Joseph into slavery in the whole thing. He recounts all the major stuff they did bad, gives them all the curses, never says, I curse you for selling my favorite son into slavery and making me think he was dead. So I don't think he knew. You would think at that point is when that would have come out. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittites to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. And when Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. And then Joseph fell on his father's face, and wept over him, and kissed him. Leah is still not his wife. He's in a poetic repetition of Abraham's wife, Abraham and Sarah his wife, Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and Leah. It doesn't say my wife. It was a sad event. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. So why did the Egyptians embalm people? They believed after death that your soul in the spiritual world would come back at night and inhabit your body to sleep. And refresh and recharge. So if your body decayed or was destroyed in some other way, your spirit would lose its anchor and it would eventually die a second time. And so the Egyptians were terrified of their earthly body decomposing. They called it the second death. In fact, in one of their spell books, spell number 175 in the Book of the Dead was actually titled, "The Spell for Not Dying a Second Time." So, but why did Joseph embalm Jacob? If this is an Egyptian pagan practice, why did he embalm Jacob? Well, there's one reason, and that's purely practical. He's not going back for quite some time. The body's not going to survive in the Egyptian heat for very long, and they stay here for, what does he say, 70 days? Right? Yeah, 70 days. So you're going to have to embalm it if you're going to get the body to actually survive for 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. In my tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore, let me please go up and bury my father, then I will return." And the Pharaoh answered, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear." So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. And when they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. And he made mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Which is a strange thing to say, because how would the Egyptians have gone up here? They would have come up the Bimaris to get up here, right? The other side of the Jordan would be over here, but that's not where the tomb is. And so this is a very clear sign that it was being written by Moses during the Exodus, because where was Moses when he was writing this? Over here. And he's saying it's on the other side of the Jordan. So it fits with that. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite. I feel like I've said that like 800 times. Bought the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. And after he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father.
They could have stayed, they just came back though. Right?
Yeah, they were there. I think that was the danger with Pharaoh. Like, if Pharaoh wouldn't have let them go, would have been because he thought, you're not coming back once you go back home. Famine's over. Why do you need to come back? But Joseph had promised. He trusted Joseph. And so they did. It may also be why all of those Egyptians came with him. There may have been a lot of soldiers too. You guys are coming back. But that Pharaoh was the nice Pharaoh, like them. We'll stop there for today because we're getting way over. So we'll wrap up Genesis 50 next time, do our review, and we're going to jump right into Exodus.